Hi, good evening, and thank you for joining us. This is another edition of our lives with Quint, with the team at Quint. And today, part of our elections coverage, we're talking about electoral bonds and what else we have discovered from electoral bonds in the last 1 week. Now, remember, a couple of things have happened. Supreme Court slapping SBI on the knuckles twice for not putting out enough of the data as asked for. Remember, first SBI put all the data, then put out data. Did not put out the alphanumeric numbers that linked the two lists, and the Supreme Court had to pull up SBI and demand that those details. Joining me in this conversation right now, we have the reporters from Quint who've been working on this story, and of course, Aditya Menon, who joins us as well. A couple of his team members joining us. That's Aditya Menon. He's the the editor of political of reporting at the Quint. He's been with us every week, and we'll be talking right through up to the election. Also, Himanshi Dahiya, who's joined us before, as a journalist who's been working on these numbers, and they've sort of been cracking through the data to find out what else we can read through it. Fatima Khan of the Quint joins us as well, another journalist who's been working with the Quint on these numbers. And of course, as a special treat for our audience, we have one of the lawyers who argued the case in Supreme Court, who joins us right now as well. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. Just to give, so that's Nizam Pasha joining us as well. We're open to questions from the audience. So put your questions in the chat window if you'd like to ask any of our guests, either the journalists or the lawyers, the questions. A quick, sort of recap. Like I told you, the EC released fresh data on Sunday, which is the 17th of March. It had a total of 523 recognized and unrecognized political parties and data from those parties. Majority of the parties have also sort of provided a chronological breakdown of the bonds that they have encashed. And 10 parties have included the names of the donors who they've gotten money from, including the Aam Aadmi Party, the DMK, the AIADMK, the Samajwadi Party, the NCP, the Janata Dal, among others. The Congress and the BJP did not provide that data. And there's some interesting information that has been picked up since then. So quickly, let me just take you first to Aditya. Aditya, of all the data that you looked at, after the additional sort of numbers came out, what have you picked up so far?
So I think we use two sets of data, two data sets. One is the details of the companies and the bonds that they purchased. And we used another data set, which is the second envelope that was released and that was put up on the Election Commission website, which is the data provided by political parties and the donations they received. So when we sort of merge these two data and compare the dates, like the same date, certain companies gave very large sums of money, and on the same date, certain parties received very large sums of money. So that sort of helps us get an idea that most likely this company has given money to this party. And because the largest sums are all almost to do with the Bharatiya Janata Party, it was easier for us to make these connections. To the BJP's credit, they were also a party that has given their date of bond and certain details which other parties haven't given, which helped us make these connections even better. So what we have found out so far is that some of the BJP's top donors are companies like Quick Supply, which gave 200 crores in one day. We have Megha Engineering from Hyderabad, which also gave a considerable amount. We have 4-5 firms linked to the Aditya Birla Group, which gave 100 crore in one day. Then we have Megha Engineering gave 115 crore in one day. It was in 11th April 2023. So these are some of the huge donations we were able to sort of connect to the BJP. So I think this is what we have found so far. My colleagues will also go into detail on these specific transactions and these companies. And I think a lot more now will be clear when the alphanumeric data is released.
I just want to quickly ask Fatima this question. Quick Supply, your report says linked to Reliance Industries. Reliance Industries have said that they don't have much to do with this company. What is your reason to say that it is linked? The two are linked.
Yeah. So their exact statement is that Quick Supply Chain isn't a subsidiary firm. sorry, their exact statement is that Quick Supply Chain isn't a subsidiary firm of Reliance Industries, but every evidence, every document very directly links Reliance to Quick Supply Chain. For instance, all their directors are also directors of multiple other Reliance firms. They share the same addresses. Their promoters are the same. Everything is directly linked with Reliance. Even on their LinkedIn pages, social media pages, they have time and again over the years, we scraped through, even till 5 years back, they had repeatedly mentioned that we are linked to Reliance in so many words. So that is one. And we did two sets of investigations on Quick Supply Chain. The first one was in the initial phase. At that time, the political parties had not released their data. But what we'd found based on the company data was that Quick, even though it's the third biggest donor, it has actually made transactions only thrice, electoral bond transactions only thrice in their entire lifetime. But the interesting part is that all three times has been just a month ahead of an important state election. So in January 2022, in November 2022, and then in November 2023. And all three are obviously mammoth sums of money, which is why they are the third biggest donors. And then when the political parties release their data, using the BJP's information that they had put out on the date of bond and the sum they received, we were able to trace it back to Quick Supply Chain, because they evidently showed that they got, say, on 5th January, if Quick gave 200 rupees crore, a crore rupees of some money, then on that very date, BJP had received 200 crore rupees from a Mumbai firm. Now, it's important to reiterate for the audience that, none of the political parties, I mean, the BJP, the Congress, the TMC, they haven't really mentioned the names of the donors. So even this BJP list does not mention the names of the donors, but it does mention the company firm's city. So it mentioned Mumbai, and on that particular date, only Quick Supply Chain was a Mumbai firm that donated 200 rupees crores. So I think that is how we were able to really link companies and the political party. And Quick also happens to be the single biggest donor on a single day. Like, no other firm has given rupees 200 crores
Yeah.
to any party. So that is a big revelation that's come
Yeah.
out.
So I just want to ask Nizam Pasha this question. When you were arguing, first of all, congratulations on this victory. When you were arguing this case in court, Nizam, um, one of our questions also says that how do we actually establish a quid pro quo or some sort of racket? Because now we're seeing some, sort of instances also where there have been ED raids, there have been IT raids of companies that have donated before and after. Plus, as you can see, the journalists talking about how these donations have come in right before elections. Now that we have some of this data, does it prove what it is you were arguing when you started off?
See, it will be very. It won't be so easy to just establish quid pro quo, but the trends or the hints that will give you a suspicion that there was any quid pro quo will start emerging from the data. So, for instance, suppose there was electoral bonds purchased immediately after there was an income tax or an ED raid on a particular firm. That will only give rise to a suspicion. Now, the next problem that will arise will be that suspicion then has to be followed up in course of some investigation to establish whether or not there was a connection and there was actual quid pro quo, because this will be a PC Act, a Prevention of Corruption Act offense. For a Prevention of Corruption Act offense, the CBI has to conduct a preliminary inquiry, and if that preliminary inquiry yields a result that there is some indication or suspicion that an offense has occurred, they have to register an RC, which is a proper case, and they have to start the investigation. Now, given the political environment and our experience with the investigative agents, central investigative agencies, we don't expect the CBI to start taking action, particularly in those instances where there are BJP-ruled state governments or central governments and their officials and ministries at stake. So then perhaps the next thing to be done in court would be to move a petition asking for a special investigation team, placing the preliminary data emerging from these analyses that you all are doing before the court, to say that this ex facie suggests, on the face of it, suggests that this is sufficient ground for at least an investigation to be done on whether there was quid pro quo. no action has been taken despite us attempting to say write a complaint or send a complaint or to the CBI. Therefore, the court may direct an investigation under a court monitored special investigation team, SIT, or something of that sort. So I feel that that's the next step in terms of the courts. Once the analysis is complete and that evidence emerges, then that evidence, because I don't expect the CBI, but of course there'll be an attempt to make a complaint. And the next step for the lawyers in the courts to step in is to file a petition in Supreme Court asking for an SIT investigation to do a preliminary inquiry on that evidence to see whether a PC Act, a Prevention of Corruption Act case seems to have been made out. Faye, you're not audible.
I think Faye's audio isn't working.
Faye, you're not audible.
I think while her audio comes back, Mr. Pasha, can I ask you what, realistically, what data will be and in what format? Is it likely to be just a dump of alphanumeric numbers, or will it be sequential? What is a realistic expectation from tomorrow?
See, the SBI submitted data in 2 silos. I would expect realistically that because they've already said they can't do the matching exercise, but at least the alphanumeric codes on either side of that table, that is in both silos, they have to provide. So for the purchase as well as for the deposit, they have to provide the alphanumeric codes as well. In which case, of course, their entire premise of filing those applications for adjournment falls to the ground, because then it will take any data analyst half an hour to scan and match those alphanumeric codes on both sides of the silo, which an exercise which they said they needed 3 months for. But the least I would expect them to do, without being foul of the Supreme Court orders, would be to give the details on both sides, matching the alphanumeric codes with the remaining details of the bonds which they have given, because they're getting that details from that same piece of paper. So they can't say that now these codes are in a separate Excel sheet, because they've actually then extracted them from that from the bond papers and put them into an Excel sheet just to confuse and confound. So I feel that that's not something that they can easily get away with. So I'm expecting that a revised submission of that same 2 silos, this time with alphanumeric codes.
Nizam, do you believe, sorry about the audio problem, do you believe that, do you have reason to believe that SBI was deliberately delaying or, holding back data?
See, I don't wish to speculate. There were, of course, some apprehensions, because institutional integrity has not been at a high since 2014, and that's been a concern that has been voiced time and again in courts and in public discourse. So there's nothing to be held back in that. And amongst things which have compromised institutional integrity have been the fact that extensions have been granted to persons who otherwise, had their terms were over, or somebody who was given an out of turn promotion to be leading an organization, etc. I'm generally talking about the kind of ways in which institutional integrity has come under question. So that exercise one would be forced to do if the data again now tomorrow is not forthcoming from the SBI. But so far, while SBI continues to comply with Supreme Court orders, we'll reserve comments on why it is we believe that they were not complying.
Aditya, on your team, you all have done some work on these alphanumeric numbers. Would you explain it to our audience as to how these numbers work and why there was a problem with the data that was released?
So I think this investigation was done by my former colleague Poonam Agarwal. In 2018, she purchased bonds and found out that there is a hidden alphanumeric code which isn't visible to the naked eye. But after forensic analysis, she found out that there is a hidden alphanumeric code, and that sort of led to the demand for these codes to be made public. There were concerns around the anonymity of the donors' data. So it is this data of these alphanumeric codes that will be released tomorrow. This will obviously, it will reveal what denomination the particular bond is. That bond can be a 1,000, 10,000, 1 lakh, 10 lakh, or a crore. Who purchased this bond, and on the other side, which party got money from the bond of this alphanumeric code. So yeah, as Mr. Pasha said, these are the two sets of data we are going to get tomorrow through this alphanumeric code. This is the realistic expectation. Yeah.
And just to add to that, because like he said, that alphanumeric code has to be extracted from the bond. Therefore, for them to dump it into a separate sheet and say that these are the alphanumeric codes would mean that they have individually extracted it from that bond, but not correlated to that bond in their data. So that's a deliberate attempt to confound and conceal.
So basically, so for our audience, there's a sheet of paper on which there is a number printed that you can only see with UV light. And if there is someone in SBI who has actually sat with every sheet of paper and taken out that number and keyed it in, but they haven't actually written down which sheet they took that number from, then it's a deliberate attempt to sort of make the process more difficult than it has been. And Nizam, we talked about this last week, Aditya and I, about how they did not make it easy for anyone to read this data. They tried, I mean, the manner in which the data was dumped itself was sort of a difficult, deliberately difficult way.
So again, in today's age of information storage and analysis all being machine driven, it was just a simple question of data entry and even the matching exercise. As a matter of fact, once you entered and digitized the two silos of data, it takes one click of a program to match them. So both the data entry as well as the data matching are not exercises that one would expect in today's age of information technology to be something that the SBI needed 3 months for, and that June deadline was suspiciously coinciding with being after the declaration of election results. So again, just the nature of the prayers made by the SBI makes one wonder whether there is more to this than meets the eye. But yeah, I mean, I would expect that that this is not data which should have been either this confusing, or this haphazard and this scattered, or this easy to match and organize. Honestly, so
Yeah.
for an organization of the size and resources of SBI to be doing all of this and to be doing it so shoddily does leave a doubt in one's mind, I have to say.
And it's interesting because on one hand, the RBI constantly talks about how strict the KYC regulations are within India, and the whole point of using electoral bonds was to be able to electronically track all of this. Aditya, a question for you. Abhishek Mittal says Harish Salve mentioned two things: a serial number and an alphanumeric code. Are these two things different?
I think alphanumeric code is different. The code, it has both numbers and characters in it. So, and that is the one which is not visible. So I think it's the two are not the same.
I also want to ask, maybe bring in Himanshi at this point. TMC was very interesting because after the BJP, one would have expected the Congress to be the second largest recipient, but it turns out to be the TMC, which runs only one state, that has received a large number of donations. Any insights into where this money has come from?
No, actually, Faye, and that is what we were discussing. Aditya mentioned that we have to give BJP the due credit here because the data that they provided, of course, it's not as transparent as DMK or AIDMK, who went ahead and revealed the names of the donors. But the data that's been provided by Congress and TMC and a few other parties is even, it doesn't tell us a lot of things as of now because they haven't really mentioned how much money was credited from which bank or which city, or they've really given us no information to speculate or to even, try to put together anything. So it's very difficult to find out who donated to TMC and how much and when. When actually we can, because the data that EC uploaded in the first dump of data that came out, that made it pretty clear that a large sum of donation to TMC came around the West Bengal elections. But that was all that is all that we know for now, and I think only alphanumeric data coming in tomorrow will tell us where they got the money from.
Question for Nizam Pasha, and this one comes in from one of our viewers. Divyansh says, are there any potential consequences for a company that has donated beyond its own profits? It's my question. There was no rule, right? The law was changed to allow that.
And that change law has now been struck down. So actually, that is a bit of a question that arises, that there was a limit of 7.5% of the net profits. That limit was removed by an amendment, and today the court has said that amendment was unconstitutional, so it's stillborn. So therefore, a shareholder today can demand, as part of the shareholder's right to information, that how much money was given, why was this given in excess, and maybe file a petition. This is untested, but maybe file a petition for oppression and mismanagement before the NCLT, saying that when the company is suffering these kind of losses or has such minimal profits, at that time for the company to be donating this kind of money is oppressive of its shareholders, because we are not being declared dividends, saying that the company has no money, and meanwhile they have this much money to be donating to political parties. So they can very well that can start a separate round of corporate litigation if the shareholders particularly of listed companies and large public corporations are willing to step up and move court. There can be petitions filed for oppression and mismanagement, like I said.
Yeah, so in fact, that was going to be a question. So, for example, in Airtel, we're talking about, I think, 330 crore rupees donated. At the same time, there are people that Airtel owes money to. There are employees that need to be paid or need to be given raises. Is there room there for a regular shareholder to ask questions of, is this the cost of doing business? Why are these companies putting so much money into political donations?
See, absolutely. So the thing is that generally executive decisions in a company are taken by the board of directors, and the board of directors has that kind of elbow room and room for maneuver in deciding corporate strategy. But if the numbers are completely disproportionate, and like you say, where there are shortage of funds, there are no dividends declared, there are employees that have to be paid, bonuses are being withheld, and at such a time the company is purchasing bonds worth several crore rupees. Definitely a question can be asked of the board of directors by the shareholders that on what ground, forget the fact that it was permissible, because the most that law did was allowed you to exceed that number, but still as the board of directors there has to be some justification for why you did that. And
some fiduciary responsibility as to how you're using the money.
So there is that, in that sense, there's that breach of fiduciary responsibility. Of course, this like I said, this is untested, because now an oppression mismanagement petition is largely maintained against a promoter group. Now the promoter group is also separate from the board of directors, even though they appoint the board of directors. So actions of the board can't directly be attributed to the promoter. So there are all sorts of legal complications and questions which will arise. But I definitely think that there will have to be solutions found within company law for shareholders, particularly minority shareholders, to be able to question the board on decisions which are ex face, that is on the face of it, not in the interest of the company, unless there is something more to it than meets the eye. That, the company has no money, so if you're just looking to fund a party that you support, there has to be a limit to how much you're paying, and these numbers don't make out the kind of benefit the company is formally getting from the donation. And in some cases, you put the numbers together, the kind of money that is being donated is also commensurate with the kind of benefits from, say, state contracts, licenses, etc. that is coming through. In which case, again, then it's a matter of investigation, because that's again quid pro quo. So there's the Prevention of Corruption Act complaint involves, say a company, because I think there's some data emerging on that lottery company. So in such cases where, say, a company has donated large amounts of money and has in the immediate aftermath received some benefit from the government, that again is a subject matter of investigation. Just like we were talking about for ED and IT raids, the same goes for benefits. Then the shareholders may not be the ones questioning it. Then the public at large, because that, at the end of the day, that's a cognizable offense under the penal laws. So the public at large can be saying that you register a complaint and investigate it because the data suggests quid pro quo.
Aditya?
Yeah,
Go
I'll
ahead.
just cite a little bit of data. One company which was in the news recently, Navayuga Engineering, which was behind that
Yes.
entire Uttarkashi tunnel collapse, that had a net, it was on a net loss from 2019 to 2023. Net loss, so it's not a small net loss. 495 crore was its net loss from 2019 to 2023, and it has donated 55 crore electoral bonds. Again, the lottery company that Mr. Pasha cited, Future Gaming, their net profit was just about 200 crore in this period, and they donated bonds worth 1368 crore. There is another company, Madanlal Limited, which gave 150 crore on a single day to the BJP in the run-up to the 2019 elections. That company, I mean, they gave this 150 crore along with another allied company called Quinter. That company is again net profit is 13 crore for between 2019 and 2023, and they gave bonds worth several hundred crores in this period. So, I mean, it's absolutely, it doesn't make sense if a company that is not doing well financially and yet is investing hundreds of crores in bonds. It really creates the suspicion that these bonds are an investment to get something in return from the government. That those are the questions that get raised, and what Mr. Pasha is suggesting, that these are matters that need to be probed in some manner, is absolutely correct.
Also, and let me just bring in the other journalists here, Fatima. The correlation between raids by investigative agencies and the money changing hands. Of course, we had a situation where the finance minister at an event actually said, no, but in some cases we've reached after the money has been sent as well. Instead, which I thought was interesting, that she was not denying a connection between these two things, because one would have expected that she said that raids happen based on investigation and not based on political donations. But is that pattern becoming more obvious now that we have a little more data?
Yeah, I mean, even on the first dump of data, Himanshi did a story about like how the 30 biggest donors, and I think 14 of them had been raided in around the time when they donated, either before or after around that period, which is a huge sum, right? Like 14 out of 30. Other investigations have revealed that amongst the top 5 donors, also there are companies that have been raided multiple times. And it's not just raided, right? It's also kickbacks in some form. For instance, on the first day, I did a story on Megha Engineering, which is the second biggest donor. And until a few years ago, it was supposed to be this really small firm that not many had heard of. And in the last couple of years, we've seen how they've managed to pick up some of the biggest infrastructural projects, construction projects in the country, to the extent that Nitin Gadkari stood in Parliament 2 years ago and he actually praised Megha Engineering firm and said that, look, this small company from Hyderabad has been able to deliver this tunnel at such a breakneck speed. Just months before this data came out, Megha bagged this huge project with the Defense Ministry. So I feel, and I remember, I mean, reading this one headline in Business Standard from I think 2 years ago, which said that a little known firm beats the Goliaths of in the construction industry, and it was Megha firm, right? So I feel like all of these things do point to something bigger at play here, that obviously time only will be able to reveal. But beyond the raids and beyond this sort of intimidation, which obviously a lot of us are being able to pick up on, there's also this sense of, okay, if we are able to invest an X amount of money, then maybe in the next decade, 2 decades, we'll be able to bear the fruits of it.
So we have another question here coming from Divyansh, and I think it's an interesting question, deserves to be asked. I'll take it first to Nizam Pasha and then to the rest of the journalists if you want to take a stab at it. He basically says Amit Shah's rationale was that what would have been cash donations or black money donations are now happening on a digital process, which means large corporations are going to declare it on their balance sheet. It's going to reflect, and you'll be able to trace this money. Imagine this amount of money actually moving in black. It's going to now go back to that. Nizam, do you want to respond to that?
See, I feel that argument of the center of entire purpose of this scheme was to deal with those donations which were coming in cash was actually it was a bit of an eyewash. So this whole black money bogey is a strawman argument that you set up only to demolish, because the fact of the matter is that the bonds were being purchased only through account transactions. The electoral bond scheme itself was very clear. The bonds could not be purchased in cash. You could only purchase them by RTGS or demand drafts, etc. So where is the question of that being a substitute for black money? If I have cash sitting in gunny bags under my desk and I want to give it to a political party, I am going to deliver those gunny bags to the political party. The bonds did not allow me to convert those gunny bags into some account balance which I can purchase bonds from. So the black market is completely separate from the audience which the electoral bonds addressed. So this entire bogey that was put up about how this is, we've now brought the cash donation down from 20,000 to 2,000 was all actually rubbish, because this is not a substitute for black money. How many of those bonds were purchased in denominations of 10,000 that you can say that somebody would have just transferred those 10,000 rupees they were about to give in cash to their account and purchased a 10,000 rupee bond and given it? So all of this, I feel that they must must credit more intelligence to the courts, the lawyers on the other side, as well as the Indian public before they make these arguments.
In fact, Aditya, I was just reading the story in the Indian Express that said just 73 hours after the Model Code of Conduct has come into force, the Election Commission has seized cash, liquor and drugs worth 20 crore rupees in Karnataka alone. So obviously, there's still cash flowing in that system.
Absolutely, I think, and also if we just compare the scale of expenditure that especially the ruling party does during elections, I don't think this 12,000 crore that we are seeing in electoral bonds spread across 5 years can account for all the expenditure that the ruling party has done in the last Lok Sabha election, this Lok Sabha election, all the assembly elections put together, and all the other political activity. I would say forget the entire campaign, even the helicopter costs of all these elections put together, you will not be able to recover from this amount. So, I mean, I totally agree with Mr. Pasha here. It's not as if cash thing has gone away. I think what has gone away are the corporate donations which used to get declared, and the details of which were made public. Association of Democratic Reforms used to put that entire list in public domain. If at all electoral bonds will affect something, it is those publicly declared donations that corporates were making through their electoral trusts, which were at least those were in the public domain. We knew who was giving whom, even if if the amounts were not great. I mean, they were 10 crore, 20 crore here and there, nowhere near the hundreds and thousands of crores we are talking about in electoral bonds, but at least it was in public. Now, I think it is that kind of political donation that is getting affected by electoral bonds.
And I think the only thing this has done is created a new market for donations which would not otherwise have been given if they were not anonymous. Things like the details Aditya mentioned, where these loss-making companies could never have had the face to publicly give those donations and declare them. So it's created a market of donations which otherwise they would just not make. And one thing I just want to add to that black money angle, Aditya is actually very right. In an election, what you spend on is very clearly demarcated between what can only be spent in black and what requires an account balance. So a Facebook, if you're purchasing ads and boosting your ad campaign through Facebook, through Meta platforms, will require only an account transaction. So for that you will require account balance. But when you're distributing notes to voters, and everybody knows that happens in India, you can't be doing that through GPay. So the black money market for in an election is actually the same and remains completely untouched by all of this. This just, like Aditya said, touches the what was earlier the publicly disclosed market and creates a new market of people who would not have the public face to make these donations, who can now do that.
You're on mute.
Another piece of information about the PM Cares Fund, which is a separate possible can of worms to be opened on a different day. But Himanshi, if I know that you worked on some of this, there was some money that was redeemed and moved into the PM CARES fund. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, so according to the rules that were set, electoral bonds could only be encashed within a 15-day period by political parties, and the fund bonds which were not encashed within that 15-day period, they were then transferred to PM CARES fund. So in that sense, I'm sure a lot of money, if it wasn't encashed by political parties in that given period of time, it did go to PM CARES, and yeah, I don't know when will we actually find out how much
Himanshi,
money.
there was also this case, I think you were referring to it, on parties that were allowed to redeem those bonds even after that 15-day period.
Yeah, I mean, and mostly it
Yeah.
happened with the BJP. This is also a report that came out yesterday where we saw that SBI did allow BJP to cash in some amount of electoral bonds after that 15-day period had elapsed. And this was from instructions this was because of instructions which came from the finance ministry. So, a lot of irregularities have come in. And once we know the data tomorrow, I think there's another challenge that lies ahead for transparency activists and lawyers and journalists is to ask questions and ask these questions and then launch probes into these irregularities which have surfaced.
I personally have a bug against pharma companies who have bought a large number of electoral bonds. So about 30 pharma and healthcare companies have bought bonds worth more than 5 crore rupees, adding up to a total of 900 crore rupees from the healthcare pharma sector. Yashoda Super Specialty Hospital, Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, Biocon, Bharat Biotech, Biological E. These guys also received approvals for COVID-19 vaccines. And now, the challenge is this. These companies manufacture drugs that get approvals from the government that we then put into our bodies and our bloodstreams. We've injected, vaccines into our bloodstreams. How do we now know whether those approvals were given? How do we now know whether the approvals were given quid pro quo or not? And is there room there to look into that? Nizam?
So that's definitely going to be one area of investigation probe, and like you said, that's an area of grave concern because that affects the human body. But personally, another thing that I am interested in and I want to know is what are the companies, the foreign subsidiary companies or the companies with foreign investment, which made donations to political parties, because then that can also impact the foreign policy decisions that India has taken in the last 10 years. And India has, deviated quite significantly from its earlier foreign policy positions on a number of counts, particularly in our immediate neighborhood. And so that's, I feel, and also a big area of concern, that are the foreign policy decisions being taken are just decisions in India's interest, or are those also impacted by quid pro quo considerations of a downstream investment or a downstream subsidiary of so and so company has funneled foreign funds from a certain jurisdiction into India, and that's impacting our foreign policy choices, is something that I find particularly worrisome.
Have we seen any of those fingerprints, Aditya, so far in the data?
Not that I recall. No. At least in the bigger donations, we haven't seen any foreign companies or foreign directors in those companies. Regarding pharma, of course, I had one case study, which is of the Torrent Group. Now, Torrent Group, even though it's not, there were no big transactions, but a lot of small transactions that the Torrent Group has done. One of which is like of some 116 10 lakh bonds purchased in Ahmedabad, which were again found BJP on the same day has got 116 10 lakh bonds that have been purchased by Torrent in Ahmedabad, and 116 10 lakh bonds have been received by the BJP in Ahmedabad. So it was pretty obvious that it was done by the Torrent Group. The Torrent Group is owned by Mr. Mehta, Sudhir Mehta, who was among the first industrialists who supported Mr. Modi right after the 2002 Gujarat violence. And when Rahul Bajaj and the CII had taken on Mr. Modi in 2002, two industrialists supported Mr. Modi and threatened to pull out of CII. They were Gautam Adani and Sudhir Mehta. So, and when Mr. Modi became Prime Minister, one of his first foreign trips was to Australia, and who were part of that huge business delegation? Mr. Gautam Adani and Mr. Sudhir Mehta. And then that entire mine was signed. This SBI now, who is which is dragging its feet on that, was asked to give loan for that entire mine that Mr. Adani wanted to purchase in Australia. This entire setting has been happening since quite some time now, and like I mean, quid pro quo is one thing, but these linkages are known between the government and some of these top industrial figures. The government takes them in foreign delegations, so they are on the high table for all practical purposes.
And Aditya, and I find this interesting about us as citizens in India. We see SBI as a government bank. What we should be looking at is SBI is our bank. We pay for it. SBI is run with taxpayer money in service of the poor. But instead, if SBI is actually being used right now by the government as sort of a personal, or institution that it can use to hand out loans to who it pleases and to drag its feet on electoral bonds, that's something that should really worry us.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the banker to every Indian, but it seems to be banker to some Indians more than other Indians.
Before we wrap up, quick question to Nizam Pasha as well. What is your, as part of the team of lawyers that fought this from the beginning, what is your intention now going forward? What do you hope will come out of all of this?
So, I don't know how it will affect electoral outcomes, but I feel that at least we'll know that the Indian public is voting with open eyes, knowing what it's voting for. And like you said, a lot of the money in question actually, and not just in terms of the SBI, but a lot of the money in question is public money. So if a firm that doesn't deserve a contract, or a contract can be better executed by somebody else, is given to a firm on a quid pro quo basis, that's a loss to each one of us individually.
Yeah.
Likewise for the ED and the income tax department, which are today being used as proxies of the government to put pressure and pushes and pulls wherever required. We pay for these organizations which are today being misused for political gains and considerations. So in that sense, I hope at least that, knowing that you are personally being impacted, your money is being misused, you are being taken for a ride, and your electoral choices are deliberately being driven by and manipulated by obfuscation and concealment of data. I hope that will be something that will make for a wiser voter.
That's right. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. And if you want to be a wiser voter, then we are hoping people will read the information being put out by teams like the team at Quint that's actually reading through all of this data and interpreting it for the benefit of the voter and the audience, because larger media is not going to do it. And so it's important to actually look for that information in independent media and support that independent media. Nizam Pasha, thank you so much for making time for us and having this conversation with us. To the team at Quint, thank you for the work that you're doing. Anuj Wilfer on our chat window, thank you for the donation. We will be using that, of course, to try and improve our system as much as possible. You can find all of these stories on the website of the Quint and their YouTube page. Do take a look at it. And you can download the Beetroot News app and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more news and updates. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you, Faye.